Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So let's do some final touches here and finish up. So with the user roles plugin itself, most of the stuff is good. It's just that if right now you try to click, let's say maybe add row, instead you get this message that says permission saved successfully, because all these guys are simply submitting instead of being links. So if I click on edit, I get the same thing, permission saved successfully, which is not right because now we've made this into a form. So what I wanted to do is edit this and just tell it that these are actual buttons and not submit buttons, right? So out here in our project file, let's go to plugins and we go to user roles plugin. And in here, we want to look for the view that is the list view here. So now that this is a form, we want to take care of these buttons. So let me go. This is the add new button. So the only thing we need to do is add type is equal to button. And that should do the trick. So if I copy this to the rest of these, it's gonna work as intended. So I'll put this here, paste. Okay, and that should solve the problem. So if I now refresh and click add new, it actually tries to add something new. And if I click edit, I get exactly what I asked for. So let's try and add one row and see how that goes. So we'll say add, and we'll say this one will be ICT. Okay, so active status, yes, and let's save. Okay, so record added successfully. So this is the view version of things. So let's go back to the main, and this is what we get. So there's ICT, and then now we can choose what ICT can do. So like human resource can add and edit users, but cannot view user roles and stuff. On ICT, we can tell ICT to, let's see, what can ICT do? Okay, so for now, we just, I think we leave that be so that we can test to see if we can set permissions to a particular user. So we have this now. Now it's time to make sure that these rows do show up when we are viewing things here. So this one has an admin thingy, so this is fine. Now if we go to try and edit this user to add more, let's try on this one first of all. I want to add human resource on this one. So if I click edit, I get a list of rows here. So that is awesome. But once we save, we need this to go to the map. So let's come back here for a second. I want to go to the database so that we see what's going on. And also, we go to the user manager because that's the plugin we're dealing with now. And I'm gonna go to views. And this time I want to look at the edit view. Now, before the view itself ticks which one is right, I want to select, let's say, human resource here and save that. So if I go to the plugin PHP DB over here, there's this table user rows map, which is this one right here. So there's only one entry here, but what we want to do is map this user that we've selected to the row that was selected. So all we need is to know the row ID and the user ID. So we have the information of the user ID here. There's an ID right there in the URL, so we can easily grab that. And now we need to know the ID of this particular thing here. So now if I inspect to see what's going on there, let's right click and inspect. We need to have this input. So it does have a value. That's great. And what else? row 2, okay, value 2. Okay, so all we need now is to look for any input that has row in it and an underscore. Then we know those are the rows that we need, and then check the values. Okay, so let's come here. So this is our edit page over here. I'm just gonna type something just so it doesn't disappear when I click on something else. I'll go to controllers and let's look at the edit controller. So inside this edit controller, we're going to add something similar. Let me type something. We're going to do something similar to what we did inside the user rows. Let's go to controllers here and go to the edit controller. Is it here? Oh no, it's in the list controller. Yes. So this part where we disable stuff, in fact it's this whole thing here, row ID, checkbox. So from here, let's see, query, permission, blah blah blah. Okay, so all of this, I'm gonna copy this just so I save on, let's copy that. I save on typing. So I'm going to go to the edit controller of the users manager here. So if user can edit user here, that's great. So we do this editing of the user. But before we send in our messages here, what we're gonna do is let's paste here. So this is the part that deals with permissions. So I'm gonna, I think I need to push this in a little bit. Which part is this actually? Wait, I think there's a missing, there's one of these that's missing here. I'm going to duplicate that and move everything over. Maybe twice, and then move this thing here. Okay, so let me move that as well. Okay, great. So this is the code that we've copied from here. So you can put your comment here and say save. What do we call these? User roles. Let's save user roles over here, like so. All right, great. Now, edit here, we have to add user roles or something similar. So let me go back here and let's see what kind of permissions we do have. So I'm gonna go user roles and let's see, add row, edit row, view rows. Okay, this is where we add and edit rows and stuff. So if somebody has the ability to add and edit rows, edit row, let's see here, let's put that there, edit row. Okay, cool. So let me make sure that data is not used anywhere here. Okay, that's fine. And then we go through the post data here and row ID as permission. What's happening here? Wait a second. Okay, so instead of permission here, I want this to be row. Row ID. Wait a minute. I think here we just put key instead of row ID. Just so the naming is better here. What's this? First row ID, ID. Okay, so that's fine. Let's just do things one at a time. Let's just say key. Okay. And to make sure there are no other loops that are using key at all here. Okay, so there we go. And then instead of permission, let's change that to row, like that. I think row ID actually is the value. So as we go through the post data, if you remember here, let me go back to users table and then say edit. If I inspect on this, you will see that the name, where is that? The name of the input is row underscore, and then there's a number. So this is just to make it unique. We don't really care about the name as long as it has row in there. Then we're interested in the value. So what we're gonna do here is this. Go back. So that's the row ID, which is the value, and here we're interested in row. So I'm going to select both of these. So any key that has row, if it doesn't have row, let's ignore it. If it does, then that's good. Oh, we have key here, right? What do you want to call it here? We actually don't care about this. So I'm going to remove all of this here. We don't care about this. We just want to add those to the list. So data, what is key here? Key in this case is row ID. So that doesn't matter at all. Let's remove that. Maybe to be more specific here, we can just say row data like that, so that it's easier to remember what this is for. You can put an underscore there if you want. So key, okay, then we put row ID. So we just want to know which rows have been selected for this user, and so those guys will be saved inside this array. Okay, cool. So now we disable all rows first. So disable all rows. And let's see, user permission, let's change that to user row. Like this, let's say user underscore row. Okay, something like this. So let's update the rows table wherever this user is. So let's go back to the table here for a second so we know what we're dealing with. So wherever the user ID is, whatever rows they have, we want to disable them first. So we're going to disable based on user ID. So let's grab the user ID here so that we can do this thing. So here I will do this. Let's say user ID is equal to, let's get the session data, and let's put the user function, and let's say ID, something like so. Now we can put this a lot further, maybe even here. I think we went a little too far on the tabbing here. This should be a little outside, so I'm gonna move this a little bit like so. Okay, so we have user ID there. Just make sure you're not using it anywhere else. And let's come down here. We're gonna say, okay, so permissions table, no. Let's look for the right table here we want. If we go to our plugin.php, oh wait, these are optional tables, are they? Users manager. Okay, so we'll check in optional tables, and we want this rows map table. So I'm gonna copy that. Let's paste that, and then here we'll put optional underscore tables, because that's the right table name. So update that table, and then we set disabled is equal to 1, but not everything, right? So we say disabled is equal to 1 where user ID is equal to user ID, like that. So we don't limit it to 1 because we know there's more than that, and we just want to add the user ID, which is this one here. So I'm gonna put a comma. Let's add an array there with user ID, and let's point it to the actual user ID, like that. Okay, so now we've made sure disabled is 1 on all of those that this user belongs to, all the rows that this user belongs to. Okay, so let's save that. Now we save to the database. Now permissions, let's say data. We don't really need this ID at all, so I'm gonna move that. So data in here, this is row data, that's what it's supposed to be. So this one right here, let's put it here. So row data as row. So let's do row like that. Okay. And once we start looping here, we don't need another loop. This was a loop within a loop, but we don't need that. Let's remove these. Where is this from? Ah, right. I don't know why this moved. Okay. Hopefully I haven't missed something. It doesn't look like. Okay, let me move this like so. Okay. All right, so row data as row. Now remember, these are actually row IDs that we were saving in there. So I'm gonna copy this and paste there like so, just to be consistent. So row ID, and now we're gonna say row, use a row first. Let's try and grab the, wait a minute. This is not user row. We need user row map, not the one that has user rows here. We need this table to be working here and not this one here. Okay, so user row query here, because we're using the query function, it doesn't matter which class we use. So what I would do is on the edit here, I am going to go, let's go to the plugin here. Wherever we declared this user row, that's controller, okay. And we declared, where did we declare user row from? Okay. Right, so not here, I guess. Let me go back. Let's see where this is from. Let's try and find. Okay. Oh, because this is new code. All right. Okay, so I see what's happening here. We copied this from user rows controller. So let's come down here. This is where we copied it from. That was user permission actually. So which means in the plugin itself, this is where it was declared in the controller function, and there it is. So this is what we got. All right, so that makes sense. But this is not what we want to use. Let's go to our users manager plugin again. Let's look for the models that are in here. So I want this one, user rows map, because this is the table we are dealing with here. It's the user rows map. So let's instantiate that one instead. So I'll close this. So now we are back to the plugin of plugin.php of users manager. So since this thing will work alongside one of these, let me just instantiate it here. So I'll call it user row map class like that. And since we are in the users manager namespace, that's what we need. And this one is user rows map class like that. Okay, cool. So user rows map, copy that. It will be available to all the controllers, which means I can replace this guy with that one, like so. Okay. Wait, why is it capitalized? Let me use small letter here. Like so. Okay, great. So that seems to be fine. Now there is no permission here, so once we get the row ID, we are looking for row. Let's grab wherever the row ID is equal to this row ID here we are trying to get, and the user ID is equal to user ID. So here what we are doing is we are trying to find if a record already exists that we want to save. And remember, we are trying to find that specific record using row ID and user ID. So if there is, for example, I am user number 1 and I have selected row number 1, so this record will be unique to the rest, because even though I'm the same user, I can have different IDs for row IDs. So we'll be looking for the comparison of the two. If we find that, since it will be disabled, we simply enable it. And if we don't find it, then we create a new record like we do here. So this is row ID, and that will be user ID and user ID here, like so. Okay, so here we update with that same row, disable is equal to 0. And really, this is all we need to do. Okay, and I'm going to copy this to the add controller as well, because even when adding a user, we want to do exactly this. So I'm going to copy this. Now, when we are adding a user, most likely there will be no old records. So we don't expect it to ever go here, but who knows. Let's see, for each row ID plus the user. Where is the user ID here? Okay, so I put it here. User ID is equal to... Okay, so actually this is wrong. We are not supposed to get the user ID from here. We are supposed to get the user ID from the existing record. So let me correct this, because I could be the admin editing somebody else's profile, and instead it will save mine because I'm getting who's logged in here. So instead of what I'm doing here, there's an old row. Where is the old data? So edit user, blah blah blah. So there's row over here, row ID, right? That's the user ID, not so. Validate. Row image. Okay, cool. So that's the one we get here. The user ID is that. But on the add, since this user does not have a user ID yet, we'll have to grab this from the one we've just inserted. So here the user ID is going to be user insert ID, like that. So whatever ID was last inserted, that's the user ID we get, and we continue down here. Now, since we know that we're not going to have to update any of this, we don't really need to check if a record exists. All we need to do is insert. So I'm just going to delete that and that. Move this thing over. So make sure this is in the add controller, not the edit controller. All right, so there we go. We saved. Oh, wait. This is supposed to be row ID here. Let's do the same in the edit controller. This is row ID because we are grabbing it from here. Boom. Alrighty then. This should do the trick. Okay, so we should be able to save this information now. Now, let me close that. Let me make sure I can save this guy as a human resource person. So I'll select that and hit save. Okay, so it says record edited successfully, but at the same time that record wasn't found. Okay, so what's happening here is that the record was edited successfully, but it's saying that record wasn't found because we redirected to an empty thingy here. So I don't know how that happened. Let's go back to our edit controller and let me try here and see. So row ID isn't a thing, right? What's going on? Oh, that's because I override row here. So I should avoid doing things like this. So row already exists, so we shouldn't use that. So instead we're going to change this. You can change this to something else. Maybe call it I don't know, iRow or something. I don't know. Let's say I'll call it result, right? Something like this. Alright, so let's go back. So some things have been edited. So the image was removed here for the user once I edited the user. And why is that? I do not know. Image. The file exists, row image. Why was that deleted? This is in the edit controller, right? Post. Okay. Post data image, not empty file data, blah blah blah. If not empty. Okay, that's weird. In any case, let me click on the table here to see if anything was saved at all. And it seems to have actually done that. Okay, so that worked, but our image is lost. So let me edit again. Now on editing here, it doesn't tick the right box. So we're going to deal with the image, but let's deal with this human resource. I need to see it ticked over here. So yet again, we're going to copy how we did things from the other, where is this? If we go to the user rows here, we can look at the, let's go to plugin.php. So there's a thing here after query. So there it is, get rows. So I'm just going to copy this. So copy that, copy. Let's go ahead and put this inside. This is user rows. We go to the plugin users manager. Okay, good. And then after query, this is get users. Okay, that's good. But let me wait 1 second here. Okay, so when we get users over here, we could, instead of get rows here, let's forget about this. I'm going to remove this get users part and remove the closing tag. And the rest of this is inside a loop. So you see this is exactly the same here. So instead of repeating our loop, we can do both things in the same loop. So what I'll do is remove this loop over here like that. And let me move this one step. And let's go ahead and move this inside like so. Oopsie daisy. Tab it. And let's move this down. So you can put comments over here to make sure get users rows. So you don't forget what that part is doing. Okay, good. So get users, great. So user permission, we keep in mind that our namespace here is users manager, and we want to grab things from this user rows map. That's where we want to get things from. So we did instantiate this already at some point. So I'm just gonna copy that user rows map. Where did we do that from? Where? Right here. So I just want to copy. It's just laziness in typing. I'm going to come back here to the query part, and let's replace with this one. So we're getting from the rows map because we want to know which ones of these are selected for our current user. So using the user ID, we can grab the row IDs and then display them. Okay, so with this, let me grab this part, copy. Is this repeated anywhere? Probably not. Let's paste there. So instead of permissions, this should be rows. Wait a minute. This one grabs the user rows, but wait a minute. This is similar actually. Row map, query, user rows, where? Okay, so that grabs from the row map, but it grabs user rows themselves, the names of the rows. Okay, so that's okay. But this one grabs the IDs of the rows. Okay, so we're gonna say row IDs like that. That's what we'll call them. And instead of permissions, let's do row underscore ID. So row IDs map result key, and then in the column we are just grabbing the array column from row IDs, row ID. So that's great. We are getting the row ID based on the user ID. Okay, so that should do. Wait a minute. Yeah, so the where clause here is for the user ID. Since these are user rows that we are getting, so that's user ID there, and disabled should be equal to 0. Okay, that looks about right. So once we have this, that's great. Now we can use this information we grabbed in the view. So let's go back to the view, edit view. This is in the users manager, as always. Let me go down here. I'm looking for the place where we are looping through the user rows. So we want to compare with what's inside the user's row to see if they are in that array. So we'll say in array, and here it's row underscore IDs like that. And that should, wait, in array row, blah, blah, blah. Wait, rows as row. This one should be ID actually, because we are comparing the row IDs. All right, and what about here? No, the rest should remain the same. So I'm going to refresh. Okay, so I expected this one to be ticked. So let's try and see what's going on. So we can check what's going on here by trying to echo this row IDs. So I'm gonna paste this here. Just gonna do a DD and do that to make sure that we actually have that information. And undefined property class row IDs, so it does not exist for some reason. Okay, so what I want to do is just check what's inside row then. Let me make sure. Okay, so this is how this row is being read, and as you can see, it doesn't have our extra column here. It does not. Okay, so now the reason it doesn't have is because if we go back to the plugin.php here, it's looking for when we say get users to actually grab this information. So maybe since this get users doesn't seem to be part of this, what we could do is duplicate this Okay, so I'm just gonna duplicate this and put an else statement over here, like so. Okay, so instead of get users, let's say, maybe we can just leave it. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can use the same name here. So I'm gonna go to, we're already in the plugin.php of this one. Let's go to where we are reading from where we're creating our row. It's right here where we're getting our row, right? So if ID is there, let's create that row. This is for the main content, that's great. So we're creating that row, but before we do this, so let me do this. Let's add a query ID. So say user, or instead I'll use the dot notation because it's static. So say query underscore ID is equal to, let's put the get users there. So the moment we give this query that ID, it means now it can actually go in here and run this stuff while it's at it. So refresh and let's go. So now you see the human resource ticked right there because the code is actually going through here and collecting that information. Very cool. Okay, so good. Now if we go back, we should see this user has a human resource row. And if I edit now, I want to add another image. So I'm going to go to where the images are in my PC. You can go to where your images are, people, and let me add a user here, any of these guys, and let's hit save. Okay, so that's saved. Great. But I want to edit and make sure my image is not being released once I just hit save, like so. And there it is, the image is gone. So there's something wrong going on with our images here. So let's try and edit one more time. I will click to add an image. Let's fix this rather quickly. And let's hit save. So I want a link to this image. I want to know if it's actually deleted when things are saved. So let me hit save here. And let me go here and refresh. The image remains. So that's not cool at all. Okay, so things are done here, but let's go back to our edit controller. And this should be inside the user's manager. So there we go, edit controller. So the part I don't want is this, where we're actually not unlinking the image, right? Because the image is still there, as we saw. It does not get deleted. So what's happening is that we are just replacing the record with post data image there. So that should happen inside post data here. So what I would do is, so here where we're unsetting post data ID, we should likewise unset the image part as well. So let's see, post data ID. Wait, where are we in? Okay. So if this is empty, let's remove it entirely. So I'm just saying if empty here, let's unset it. So I'm going to unset this like so. Great. All right. So if the post data image is empty, let's unset it so that we don't replace that data when we update. So let's just confirm this is working as intended. Click edit. Let's click there again. And I'm going to load this image. Let's hit a save. Okay, so unset unexpected token on line 33. So that's a syntax error, which are always the easiest to fix. It just means you typed something wrongly. So in this case, I forgot one closing bracket here. So let's refresh again, resend, and there we go. Let's go back to edit and let's hit save. And now our image is safe. But if we go to edit, let's try and change this image. And by the way, I want to see whether that image will be destroyed. So click on that, let's hit save. So there we go. This image should no longer exist, and it no longer does exist. So everything is working as intended, except when we are viewing this user. You see, he has human resource. Let's also try and add more than human resource. Let's try ICT and human resource. Let's save that. Okay, that's great. But you see, we don't see any of that in this list. However, here we see it very clearly. It's human resource and ICT. So we just need to copy this into the view section of things right here. So what I'm going to do is go to the, let's go to the plugin.php. This is still users manager. So when we say get users, we are getting all the right information. So that's good. And let's see here on the view, that's that here. Okay, so get users does happen here, and okay, there, that's great. So all we need to do is copy what we did on the list view. So let's go to the list view. Where did we put our, this is right here, the rows are right here. So I'm just going to copy this, copy, and let's go to the view part of things, and it's right here where we have the rows. So inside this, I'm going to paste that like so. Okay, and just by doing that, we should have the information we want. So refresh, and there it is. So the rows that belong to this one are human resource and ICT. Let's get back here. Very good. And finally, we want to know if this user really doesn't have access, because that's important when we compare it to the admin. So right now I'm logged in as admin, but let's make sure we check out the rows that ICT people have, which is none whatsoever. But human resource does have something here, right? So we can do things with users, but we can't add or edit user roles themselves. So let's see if I do a logout and log in as the other dude, if we'll get what we want. So this one, what's the email address for this one? Let's go to the edit. Okay, so email 2, that's the one. So let me log out and let's log in. It's email 2, and let's put our password there. Okay, so if we go to the admin area and I click user rows, wait, can I view user rows? I'm not supposed to be able to view user rows here, and neither should I be able to save user rows. So let me try and click on this just to change the permissions. Okay, so it doesn't work when I'm here. Permissions do not save. As you can see, even though I can view the page, I can tick stuff. Let me add stuff on this and hit save permissions. It doesn't work. That's great, but I shouldn't be able to view them entirely anyway. So user rows is here. Let's go back to our code here and see if we do have this feature. But as you can see, edit and delete buttons are gone here. And if I click add, can I add a new row? So let's see here. Let's give it a try. New row, active, yes. Let's save. And as you can see, nothing happened. It didn't actually save. So if I come back, I don't have that new row. So the security features are there. It's just that I can see what I'm not supposed to see. So let's start with this add new. And if I try, let's say, edit /1 in the URL, I can see the edit of this. Let me try and edit this to admin something and hit save. it actually saved successfully, which is wrong. I'm not supposed to be able to do this. And as you can see, there it is. I managed to edit it. So let me go back and let's fix that. So first of all, let's deny access to somebody who cannot do this. So let's go back to user rows. That's the user rows plugin. Let's go to edit controller. And as you can see, it's asking if I can edit user. So that's the wrong thing I am giving permission to. This should be edit row, like this, right? So before I change that, let me actually just edit this row back to what it's supposed to be. Let's go edit, admin, like that, and hit save. Okay, so that edited it. If I click edit again, this time let me put the right permission that's required here. It should be edit row because these are user rows in here. Okay, so let me get back here and let's try again. Let's add some gibberish and let's hit save. And as you can see, it didn't save. It's hard to see, but you see there, it did not save. So let's go back. Document expired. Great. Let's just refresh it. And there it is. So in the first place, I'm not supposed to see this. So let's make sure we don't see the edit row if I'm not allowed. So let's go to the view, the edit view here. And I'm assuming it's the same mistake. We should say row instead of user. So let's go down here. Let's see other permissions. Where are the other permissions? Save, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, no other. Okay, that's the only user can we have there. So refresh and it says access denied. That's great. How about when I want to delete this thing? Okay, are you sure you want to delete? I shouldn't be able to do this. So let's go to the delete side of things and let's change that to row as well. Okay, easy to forget these things. Now if I refresh, access denied. And at the same time, do not forget to change here. So in the delete, it's correct. There it is correct. There it is correct. Edit permissions, that's correct as well. Okay, let's go back to the delete, make sure it's, what about the add? This is add row as well. Okay, so that was wrong too. And in the add row. Okay, so that's correct there. Now in the list view as well, this add new button should have add row instead of add user. So you can just search for user can to make sure that you have all the right permissions here that you need. So this is should be view rows like that. Okay, so let's make sure that is correct. Okay, cool. Now with that in mind, we should see this disappear as well. Oh wait, it didn't. So it still tells me wrong thingy here, but I shouldn't even see that thing there. So to make sure that we don't see that, I'm going to go to the plugin page. I think there's something I've missed somewhere. So let's look for user can, and it's right here. This should be rows instead of users. So now if I refresh, that disappears. So we are on the dashboard of the admin section and we just see what we can actually edit. So if I click edit, in here I can actually remove the row that I want, like so. Okay, back. Yeah, apparently I can't. So I can't edit those rows here, even if I wanted to. So which means these will remain ticked regardless what I do, because I don't have the permission to edit them at all. So as this user, I can see all of this, but what if I remove the human resource and just remain with the ICT? Or when I remove everything completely, what happens? So let's log out and log in again. as the admin. That way we can go to the admin section, change our user roles. Let me go to users here, and I just want to just remove the human resource and leave that ICT, which literally does nothing. So let's go back, and this time I want to log in again as that user who has ICT as the only role. And when I try to go to the admin section, you see access to admin page denied. Please try a different login. So as you can see, I don't have access to the admin page anymore as that other user. So sorry about that. Let me log out. Great. But if I log in as admin, then I do have access now. Boom. Let's come back here. Let's go to users, and there we go. So I can now edit and select human resource. Now if we check before I edit this, you see that it's simply disabled. The record is still there for the old human resource, but it's disabled. This is meant to save space. Instead of adding new records, we can just name those that are disabled and enabled. Now if I add it back, so now the user has both human resource and ICT, you will see that this part will change to 0, and that's the only part that changed. Alrighty then, so now at this point we've reached where you can assign user roles, tell them what they can do, what access they have, and so on in a more robust way, because one user can have multiple roles to play, and then each role can have as many permissions as you want for each plugin. So if I remove one plugin here, for example the users plugin, you see that all the permissions related to the users plugin will automatically disappear, which means we can't assign things there anymore. So let's test that real quick. If I go to users manager here, and I go to the config file and set the active to false, that way the plugin is essentially disabled, and I refresh, you will see that it's gone from the list there. No errors were encountered, and all the permissions that are associated with it are gone as well. So we don't even need to worry about a plugin that isn't there anymore. If I go back to the website home, I don't get any errors here either. Okay, and just by activating the plugin, we get all those features back. So we now can edit users, and user rows have more permissions to allow here. Alrighty then, guys. So this marks the end of the user rows plugin development. So we have a couple of plugins here. That is great. Now we're going to go and add more plugins, for example, for creating pages, for creating posts, and so on. That way you'll be able to create a blog from scratch with just clicking and dragging, or just adding content like you would normally do with WordPress. Oh, wait a second, guys. Something I keep forgetting before I forget this time as well. We need pagination here. It's not apparent because we don't have enough records, but we need to paginate. And we actually need a search bar here, because when you're dealing with usernames or users, you need to search once the records reach a certain number. So let's see how we can apply those things there. So the search bar here, do we have anything searchable? Yes, we have that that search bar in the 404 page, so we can just borrow that. So what I'm going to do is go to our 404 view, 404 plugin view file here, and I just want to grab this form over here. So grab this form, and let's get this back to where, let me close all files. Okay, so we're back to users manager here in the view. This is the list view we are interested in. So just before the table, above here, I'm going to put this form. So let's do that, move it back a little. Let's make sure everything is relatable here. Okay, that's great. So I will refresh, and this is what we've got. So in this instance, I don't need this style here to maximize the width. Okay, so we have this search bar here. That's great. Okay, so we have a search. We can put a placeholder in here just to make it more, let's see, placeholder, search by name. Yeah, there we go. Now let's refresh. So we search by name. Now we can improve the search later, but let me just show you how the search works in basic mode. And before I forget, let's add some pagination as well. So in order to paginate, we have our pagination thingy here. Where is this? Inside the core, no, the models, we have a pager right there. So that's awesome. So what we would do is back to plugins. We have to make sure we're in the right plugin folder. This is users manager. Great. And I want to change we don't need models here. So we are in the list here, but I want to go to the plugin.php to instantiate the pager class. So not in the controller, but in the view here, this is the main content. Right here where we are instantiating these other classes, better to put them in a nice order. So what I would do is I would just say, actually pager only works in one area, so let's just put it when the if statement is on the, not on the view, but on the list, which is this one right here. So okay, so there's a limit here, right? Is equal to 30. That's great. Let's use that. So here I'm going to say pager, but I'm going to set a limit is equal to 30 as a variable. That way I can use that here instead. And then when I create a new pager, I can supply the limit number there, because if you remember in the class when we created it, it has a constructor there which accepts a limit and some extras there, but we'll stick to just these are optional fields, of course. If you don't set that limit, then it defaults to 10. So in this case, if you don't put that limit there, it will assume you have 10 there. And if this limit here and the one in the pager are different, you will get unpredictable results when paginating. So it's better to supply that in there, and then this also depends on that limit. Now, since we've given it this limit, the pager knows what page we are on already. So using that limit, it can create an offset. So let's do offset is equal to, inside pager there is an offset. So there it is. So the offset, if you look, is coming from here. It's a 0, but once we do the construction here, we actually set an offset using this formula over here. So we can always grab it from there to know. That way the database knows how many records to get, how many to skip before getting the next batch of records. So we have that offset there, which is great, but we have to use this offset in a query. And since we are using this get o thingy here, the same way we are setting the limit there, we can set the offset as well, because it has that. Oopsie daisy. Let's do offset like so. Okay, great. So we've set the limit and offset of this class. We've also set the query ID, and then once we run this, it's going to take into account these two. And then finally, now we just need to see the offset. So right now, when I've done this, even though you don't see the the pagination here, if I go ahead in the URL and put a question mark and say page is equal to 2, you will notice that we don't get any results because we are on page 2. And if I now say page is equal to 1, we do get some results. So it's actually working. We just need to display the pagination here. And also it would be a good idea to show what page we are on right now. So you could put page 1 here at the top if you wanted to. So in order to figure out what page number you are on, remember that Pager does have a public function, a public variable page number. So you can always just get it from there. And remember that Pager, since we're just including these things, this is available in the view file as well. So if I go to the list here, I can, right at the top here, I don't know how to, let's put a label here and italics. We can say page, and then we can do pager, and then do page number, like this, and close that, like so. Alright, so if we do that and refresh, you will see there is page 1 over here. Let's get back here. Okay, so page blah blah blah. Okay, so that is protected. It just means if I type something here, you will see it in there. If I put number 12 like that, you will see we're on page 12 now. Now this can be dangerous sometimes, allowing users to manipulate what's on screen, because here I can type an actual script tag if things are not protected. You see I can type script there, and you would expect it to show script there, but it doesn't. Instead it shows you page 1, even though I type script there, because this is actually protected in the way. This is why this part here was important. Whenever you grab data from the URL, it should never be trusted. This is why we cast it to integer. Regardless what the value is, we just say, imagine this is an integer, right? And then if you can't really figure it out, just default to page 1. So, which is what's happening here, even though there it says script. Even if I put a 0, it defaults to page 1. Goody. Now let's display the actual pagination thingy. So inside the list here, the same way we've used the pager over here, I'm going to come down here to just after the table. So right about here, I'll do this. Say pager display. This is a function, so we'll do something like this. Let's go back here and refresh, and there we go. Look at that. We have our pagination now. I can click on pages like so. Next batch, blah blah blah. If I want more numbers here, what I can do is, when instantiating the pager here, I can say put 2 on each side, 2 numbers on each side of the current page. So here there's 1 number on each side of the current page, but if I refresh, you see there's 2 numbers now on each side of the current page. So that's entirely up to you. That's how you can do it. Alrighty then, guys. Oh, sorry, forgot that we do actually have to enable this search. So the search is not so difficult. As you can see here, we have, this is how we are getting these rows, right? But instead, we could use a query instead. So we can do something like rows is equal to, and then we say user, then we run a query function instead, so that we can run an actual query. So let's put query there, and within here we will have the find. That's what we will call the variable, like so. Okay, so we'll say if not empty, we're looking to the get variable here. So we're just going to use get find like that. If it's not empty, then we can do this. However, if it is empty, then there's nothing to search for. So let me move this over here and move this over there like so. So if there's something to find, let's run this. If there's nothing, let's run that. Okay, great. So here we need to create that fancy query. So we're just going to do select all from users. It is from users, right? Now there's a protected function called table here, protected variable. So maybe you can make it public so that you can grab the table name if you want, but this is fine. Select all from users, where since we're dealing with the first name, we'll say first name like. Since we are searching, we're using the like instead of the equal because we want just even a partial likeness to work here. And like, we're gonna do find, and then we say or last name like the same, find, like that. Okay, now remember that even though we have this limit and offset, this doesn't work when it comes to an actual query that if we send the query ourselves. So here we have to use these variables there. So I'm just going to say limit, right? And also offset. That way you can have several pages as well of the search term. Okay, so great. This is working as intended. Let me put this inside brackets like so. Nice. Now we need to have that find variable. So I'm just going to say find is equal to, and what do? I'm going to trim whatever the get is in there, get find, like that, and then concatenate to it some wildcards like this to make sure that it's a partial match. It will work as well. So we're just getting the text and putting these percent signs at the beginning and at the end. So if I put a percent sign just at the end, it will mean if the name should match what I have typed, the first letters that I've typed, and it doesn't matter the end. Or if you put it at the beginning, then you're saying as long as the name at the end looks like this, it doesn't matter the beginning. But if you put on both, then you can have, it doesn't matter what's on the left and on the right of that name, it should find that result. So let's try this out. I'm going to refresh and let's try and find last. And as you can see, it found last name. Let's try E, or like that. There it is. Let's try admin. So I've just searched for add, and you can see there it is. And there it is. So this is how the search works, and you can actually go to next pages and stuff with your search terms here as well. Alrighty guys, so hopefully this is good enough for you. Yes, great. So we have a search, we have pagination and the user rows and users manager working. So I'll see you in the next plugin development.